two college kids. They had sex. She said he raped her. So I go back and I'm giving him a polygraph test. He fails the polygraph test, fails it horribly. And I asked him, I gave him a piece of paper and I said, draw the scene of, because the sex happened in the bedroom. Draw the scene in the bedroom. He draws it out and draws the little end tables and draws where the clothes are and everything. I said, earlier you told me that when you guys first started talking, you were texting her. You were texting back and forth, right? He's like, yeah. I said, when she took her clothes off, because you said she took her clothes off, right? Yeah. So when she took her clothes off, where'd she put her cell phone? He's like, I don't know. I said, could it have been on the table right next to the bed? Could have been. Is it possible that she recorded this entire conversation between you and her during your sexual intercourse? And he looks at me and he says, well, if she did, that's illegal because she's got to tell me she. I'm like,
Liar, liar, pants on fire. Body language and statement analysis with Eddie Pearson, part 4 of 4.
Warning. The podcast you're about to listen to may contain graphic descriptions of violent assaults, murder, and adult language. Listener discretion is advised.
These physiological and things that happen, like the chemicals that get pushed through our body, are there for a reason. They've been there forever. Hopefully that's why we're alive again. But you can't control that. You can walk in and think you can control that, but you won't be able to. I think that's what's brilliant about it. So,
a lot of times you'll ask people questions. They'll give you a referral statement. Yeah, we talked about that yesterday in a meeting we had a meeting yesterday and we already released that information. They give you a refer back to the meeting.
Yeah.
Sometimes they want to answer the questions. You ask somebody a question, did you steal that watch? No, I didn't steal that watch. That's a reliable denial. It's about 90% accurate. If they say, I'm not the kind of person that would steal the watch, if they never answer the question, failure to answer the question, a lot of times that's need to go back and start talking about that. I was reading something the other day about years ago, Amy Fisher and Joey Buttafuoco.
but yes, yeah.
Right. Remember that whole, where he ends up going to court and a reporter asked him as he was going to court, are you cheating on your wife? And he said, no, I'm not cheating on my wife. That was true. He wasn't cheating on his wife at the time he went to court, but he did it way before. So, they're like, well, he lied. No, he didn't lie. You asked a bad question. You said, are you cheating on your wife? No, I'm not cheating on my wife.
On my grave.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Not have you ever cheated?
Have you ever, in any point or time,
that was the Long Island Lolita.
Yeah. I was reading something the other day about that, and they were talking about the questions that reporters asking, and I was like, that's, some of these guys ask these. I'm like, y'all need to hire Eddie to teach you how to ask questions.
But there's something to that.
You're right.
Yes. And again, it's framing that up when you have a chance, preparing before you go in, so you measure what you say, because again, you don't have that much opportunity, and again, when he looks and says, no, I'm not cheating on my wife. I can tell right now the cognitive load decreases. That's solid truth. Again, on my grave, I'm not. And is that, as dumb as that sounds, that's enough to have them change their behavior.
And they'll use that as a defense because they'll blame you for asking them, oh, I didn't lie to you. I told you the truth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So now you call me a liar?
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. I'm not a liar. I just told you the gospel truth.
One of our political individuals said, I never had a sexual relationship with that woman.
Yes.
That was true. He never did because that action that he had with her wasn't a relationship. Mm-hmm. And so when he was asked that question, the question that they wanted to ask him was, have you ever had sexual contact with this woman in the Oval Office?
Yeah.
But they weren't allowed to ask that. So they said, have you ever had a sexual relationship with this woman? And he said, no. And he was telling the truth.
And do you remember the body language when he said it?
Exactly. Yes.
That thumb.
Yeah, did that thumb.
Oh, he did?
Yeah. He said, no. And he was telling the truth because it wasn't a relationship. Mm-hmm. But it was a sexual,
But there was an encounter, but it wasn't a relationship.
Exactly. So my question would have been, have you ever had any type of sexual contact with this woman in the Oval Office? And he'd have had to say, if he'd have said no, he'd have been lying.
Amen.
So a lot of it just depends on how you ask that question. And I've asked very bad questions before. Very, and I was like, why did I word ask that?
Same here. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah, nobody.
Yeah.
Like if you ask somebody, do you own a blue Ford F-150 pickup truck? And they say no. What are they saying no to? Is it blue? Is it a Ford? Is it F-150? Or is it a pickup truck? So you gotta. So when I sit down and like I said, I'll ask a question and then I'll say, they say no, this is my next question. If they say yes, this is my next question. I try to be as specific as I can. That way, there's no wiggle room. Because if there's wiggle room, they'll use it on as their defense. No, you asked me this, and I said no, and that's the truth. And now you're telling me I'm lying.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, well, okay. Guess I asked a bad question.
Yeah.
And I've said that. I say, yeah, you're right. That's my fault. I asked a bad question.
Yeah.
But now that we're past that, let me ask you this. And I'll just go right back into what I want to ask them.
Yeah. We all slip. I remember one time I accidentally rolled off my tongue when a guy that he had shot his common law wife and 5-ringed her in the chest, and she died. And I remember in the interim, he didn't know that. And we were talking, and we were, it was, I had to see if there was intentionality to it, if I could. And at one point, I'm like, well, people can have questions about this, the family and everything. I said, the coroner. And he goes, the coroner. And I said, well, if she doesn't get better.
If she doesn't get better.
Well, and I'm not being mean, but she passed at the scene. And again, later, I'm like, David,
we all do it.
Yeah, we all do it. It's
like, man.
I mean, you talk about body language shifting. I was like, his was, then mine was. It was like, inside I'm kicking my ass. I'm like, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have slipped. But
when you're having a conversation with somebody, if it's me and this person across having a conversation, their toes should be pointing towards me. Their belly button should be like a laser, and it should be towards me.
Yeah.
If my toes are pointed away from the person I'm talking to, they probably don't want to talk to me, or they don't have time to talk to me. Our Chief Lawrence Weathers, I mess with him all the time. He'd be walking down the hallway, hey, Chief, I need to talk to you about something. And he'll stop. He's a super nice guy. I've known him my entire career.
Yeah.
Super nice guy. And he'll stop, and then I'll look down at his toes. And he'll look at me, and he's like, oh, because I've had this conversation with him. And he'll turn his feet towards me. He's like, oh, I forgot who I was talking to.
That sounds like Lawrence.
Yeah,
or Chief Weathers, I should say.
He'll turn his feet towards me. All right, and I was like, well, I'll talk to you later. Your toes are pointing out. Well, you don't have time for me. And he's like, oh, I'm all right.
I fixed my toes. We can talk.
My
now.
toes are better now.
Right,
exactly.
So I'm always,
My ears hurt.
I'm always messing with the
Away
Chief.
from my shoulders.
If you're having a conversation with somebody and a third person walks up and they turn their feet to a 45-degree angle, both of those individuals are involved in, they're welcome to that conversation. If you're talking to someone and the third person walks up and those feet don't shift, they stay pointing towards the person you were originally talking to, the third person is not welcome in that conversation.
Exclude them, aren't they?
Yeah, they're not welcome in that conversation.
Yeah.
So, earlier I said the feet are the most honest part of the body. So, when you are having a conversation with somebody and you just kind of look down at their feet or look around or whatever during the conversation, look at their feet, see which way their toes are pointed. A lot of times people will sit like we're sitting and they'll wiggle their feet. Okay, so if you're wiggling and stuff, that's fine. I want to see, when I ask you a question and that foot stops wiggling, what did I say that caused your foot to stop wiggling? And then it starts wiggling again. Whatever I said that caused that action to change, that's what I want to go back and talk to you about.
Yeah.
So when you see those body language cues, they start to change. It doesn't necessarily mean they're lying. You should ask yourself, what caused it to change? Now I need to go back and talk about that.
I think that's a power perspective since we sat down, is you're staying away from the land of absolutes.
Exactly.
And then we live in a world
none.
where everybody thinks it's absolutes. And
are
you
no
see these
absolutes.
people doing body and statement analysis and on the internet, and it's like, and it's like, it's not. And the whole goal is seeing the changes and identifying why.
Exactly.
And knowing that whatever that was, it doesn't mean, like you said, it doesn't mean they're lying. Right. But going back to that has merit now.
There's a reason for the change.
That's it.
You just need to ask enough questions to find out. I tell everybody, I said, body language, statement analysis, polygraph, it's a tool to assist you in getting information from somebody, whether it's truthful information or deceptive information. I want them both. That's like, I said, look at it like this. You take your car to a mechanic and he has one wrench in his toolbox. You probably need a new mechanic.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So, if you have an investigator that's doing an interview and he has one technique, that's all he's got, then we probably need to make a shift here. Get some education, do this, do that, whatever. So it's all about having enough tools in your toolbox to do a good job. And unfortunately, we don't, like I said earlier, we don't know what we don't know. So, a lot of these detectives that I try to train and talk to, I bring a lot of this information out and they're like, oh, I never thought about that. And I never thought about this. I was like, well, you know what? Someone told me, and it's one of those things, and I'll tell you a little war story here, but it's one of those things where like sharing is caring,
Right.
I want to give you this information because it may help you and it may save your life at some point. But if I just keep the information to myself, what's knowledge if you don't, knowledge is nothing if you don't share it. All right. So I was tell a little war story. I was teaching a class for some corrections officers, and I was talking about barring, barring. Barring is what your dog did when I walked up to the porch. Started barking, and you could see the teeth, okay, the growl. It's called barring. Animals do that. Darwin talked about this in one of his books when he talked about the relationship between animals' body language and humans' body language. They're a lot alike. So a human will do the exact same thing, but they do it as a smile. So I was having a conversation with this corrections officer, and I said, let's say, for instance, you're going to go into a cell and extract somebody from a cell and move them to another portion. This is the story he's telling me. They're going to do this, and they're going to move him from one cell to another cell within the jail. So the corrections officer says, are we going to have any issues? And the guy says, no, I'm not. You're not going to have any issues for me. And he kind of smiled at him when he said it. And I said, yeah, that's called barring. I said, when you see that, you need to look at their jaws, the inside of the jaws right next to the ears. If it's a genuine smile, you'll see creases in their eyes, on the side of their eyes. You'll see a crease. That's a genuine smile. If you don't see those creases, that's a fake smile. And if you see the muscles tense up like they're grinding their teeth, that's called barring. So if you see that, you need to be extremely cautious. And so I was having this conversation with him. So he calls me back about 6 or 8 months later, and he's telling me the story about moving this guy. And he said he did exactly what you said. He smiled, and then he said, I seen those muscles in his jaws tense up. And the next thing I saw was his fist coming right across the front of my face, because when I saw it, I backed up. Like he said, I took like 2 steps back. And he said, if I hadn't had that conversation with you, he'd have hit me right in the jaw. And I said, yeah. I said, you got to be very careful. I said, so when you see that smile and those tense muscles in those jaws, you got to be very cautious. Now, you'll see it in an interview or an interrogation when someone is lying to you. Yeah, I didn't do it. And they'll close their mouth and they'll bite down on their mouth so hard, you'll see those muscles and those tense jaw lines. They'll really, really get tight.
That energy's got to go somewhere.
It's got to go somewhere.
That's it.
Yeah, if you
it's
don't,
like a teapot.
If you don't, you'll explode.
And it comes, even when you talk about it, there we are back to that stuff you can't control. In the animal kingdom, in the wild, forever, showing and gritting the teeth was the first warning about who's going to come out of this and who's not.
Yep.
You never, and when dogs get into it, the first thing is the lips and the gums come up,
Yep.
and they bare the teeth. And again, so here we are as human beings and super sophisticated, and we snarl.
Yeah, you'll see the same thing.
And that's what it is, snarl. So it's again, you can't control that. It's amazing. It's amazing.
You'll see things that are asymmetrical on your face, like only one side of the face will occur, like a smile. And I can't do it because, like I said, I'm not that good of an actor. But you'll see contempt a lot. One side of the face will go up. Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, you'll see him do like one eyebrow. I can't do it. One eyebrow goes up. That's asymmetrical. It only happens on one side of the face. So when you're talking about someone, if they're expressing an emotion of contempt, you'll see it on only one side of their face.
There we go.
And and a lot of times those micro expressions. Stan Walters I've had a couple of his classes. He's absolutely amazing. But those things happen in like 1/15 of a second, and a lot of times I miss them because I'm looking at. I got 90 other things in my brain that I'm trying to think about. But a lot of times, you'll ask, somebody a very specific question. Did you put your whatever in that girl's whatever? And it's like, no. And you'll see a little smile, little contempt go up on one side of their face. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, that's an issue. We need to talk about that. Mm-hmm. It's called Duper's Delight, what they call it.
Duper's Delight.
Duper's Delight. That's what they refer to it as.
It sounds like an old 70s disco
song.
I was going to say the ice cream
Delight.
Sunday.
It's called Duper's Delight. They're getting one over on you. And you're like, I got one.
Yeah, there we go.
I got one over on him.
There we go.
I got one over on him.
Yeah, which falls into the world of narcissism.
Yep.
And which is their feeding machine.
Oh.
That's a whole nother thing.
I love talking to narcissists.
I was going to say, yes.
I love talking to those people.
As powerful as they think they are, it's their biggest vulnerability.
Man, I'll say this. It's amazing that you could think of doing this. You didn't think of this yourself. You're not smart enough to. You're not. Oh, let me tell you what I can do. I love talking to a narcissist. I can take that conversation anywhere I want to take it.
I think that's with serial offenders when you finally get them to pitch and roll while people call it bragging, but I think it's because now they're demonstrating their prowess and their ability to avoid you and me for a while. And it's like every time they can throw one out that we didn't have, even though they're throwing themselves in prison a little bit longer, is to them that's a win. Because I've always believed, I connect narcissism with evil. That's it. I'm the center of the universe, and that's it. But yeah, that's another one. Once you can put that together, again, you talk about themes and ways to go into the room, it's different. You made a good point too about how sometimes you don't have the time you'd like to have. I think I've talked about that a long time ago. Okay. For example, let's say like if you're up in the detective bureau and we have a violent crime patrol does that fantastic work and they run the suspect down. And I remember Wendell Johnson saved a murder suspect one time in Davis Bottoms because these people were going to kill him, and Big Wendell snatches him out. Oh, yeah. Well, what ends up happening, very little, and he's there, and you've got a little time. He can be in the holdover. You've got a little time, but at some point, fish or cut bait, you're going to go down and sit down with him, and somebody's dead. And they died by gunfire. And the rest of the team is out there trying to get some of that intel, but at some point, you're going to sit down. And I think that reinforces why what you're talking about is so important, is in the absence of all those details, having a good interview to elicit those responses, to be quiet, to let them fill the gaps and whatever. These days, if you watch, detectives are texting each other. You'll have a number two in the room.
Yes.
I know. I'm indifferent about that because it's again because they're watching. Yeah. But I think it better than all of that is the idea that getting trained. I'd always tell people, I look at the camera. Don't try this at home, kids. Yeah. Is when true crimers when they go live, this is a problem. This sounds easy, but you can be in big trouble by knocking on somebody's door and thinking you have the prowess of an investigator that's been trained. But not only that, at least you'll destroy the case. But that's why that's important. You don't have all of that. You know those fundamental things that I have a crime, I have a victim, I have a likely suspect, and very little information. That's why it's important to do it right.
Yeah.
Because at that point, the only time you're going to know it is if you can get them to tell it.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of times, I've been in interviews and I'm like, people have given me information and I was like, oh my Lord, where do I go with this?
Yes.
I had no idea. We'll be talking about stealing a watch and they're talking about a murder that they saw over here. I'm like, well, I got to get this information on this watch, but I want to talk about this murder. What do I do? And so I just keep talking.
We've uncovered, we'd uncovered like sexual abuse in the middle of it. And it's like, wow. And again, you can't react to that.
You can't.
You almost have to act like you're filling out the paperwork buying a car.
Well,
it's how you respond.
Yeah. Because I was talking to a guy and he was accused of sexually abusing having sexual intercourse with his granddaughter, and he finally admitted to doing it. And I was like, well, and earlier I meant to say this earlier that So you said you asked someone why something occurred or why they did something. I try never to ask a why question when I'm doing an interview or interrogation, because usually you have to get a defensive answer because they have to defend why they did something. So what I do is I say, what caused this to happen? It's the same question, but it gives them an opportunity to blame somebody else.
Yes.
So this guy was talking about having sexual intercourse with his granddaughter, and which he admitted that he did. And I said, well, what caused that to happen? He's like, well, I'm trying to teach her if someone does this or does that, she needs to let me know about this. And that was his excuse for, which is fine. I'm not agreeing with what he did. I'm saying, but the reason he told me that was fine because I just want him to tell me the information. Right. I don't care why he did it. I'm not too concerned about his intent. They can figure all that out in court. I just want him to tell me he did it.
Right.
And how many times he did it. So if he says, I did it for sex education, so later on in life, if everyone ever did this specific thing to her, she could let somebody know. Mm-hmm. It sounds like to me you're just being a good helper.
There we go. And that's it. You respond.
Her.
You respond instead of react.
And, and you want to reach over and just choke
Choke
this
his
guy.
neck.
Oh, and like, man, ugh.
Let me show you some things in case they happen to you.
Yeah,
exactly.
When you go to prison.
Yeah, when you get in prison,
prepare you
yeah,
for
if this
life. Yeah.
happens to you, and you just want to,
Yeah.
it's like a cartoon putting your hand completely through the back of his head, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, but you can't, like David said, you can't, you got to, so you're just trying to educate her, protect her in some way, give her a few experiences. If this happens or this occurs, this is what you need to do. And he's like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
So when did this start?
Yeah.
And he's just telling me the whole story. And I've also interviewed people just totally the opposite, had no care about the granddaughter at all. This guy was 63 or 64, and he was on Social Security, and he knew that if he got convicted of a felony, he would lose his Social Security. That was his priority.
Sure.
And so once I discovered that, then I started using that theme to get him to tell me, I didn't want to go down that way. Do you love her? Do you care for her? It was a money issue. So we started talking about this money issue. Okay. And so once you figure out what those emotional drivers are, just start sticking to them. And
I've always used the analogy of finding a window to open for them.
yeah,
Is finding a window that they'll crawl through.
yeah, give them an excuse to admit to.
Because I can't push them through the glass, but if I give them a window, and again that's why we respond instead of we react, we kind of tacitly agree without disagreeing.
And it takes a shitload
It
of
does.
discipline. Oh, I've been in that room and I just want to explode on somebody.
That's
and
the
I'm
gift.
like,
That's the
that
gift.
you can't, and I'm thinking to myself, well, if I do this, how much trouble am I going to get in?
Gonna lose my job.
Yeah, I'm going to lose
Oh,
my
yeah.
job. I might end up going to jail I might be in the cell next to this guy.
It's bad
I'm
enough
like,
if you look at somebody and say, well, sometimes in a relationship, women can piss us off pretty bad. Because I know later I'm going to be in a jury and there's going to be women on the jury.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the prosecutor's going to have to help recred what
Oh, yeah.
the reason David said that was he needed this guy to come along. But
Exactly.
But again, there's the window. Is man to man.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get frustrated.
And
We
a
don't
lot of
always
times,
shoot
and I
them.
tell everybody, I said, and I've done this. And I say, don't lie to them. But I have done that. I've lied to a suspect.
Yeah.
I say, now don't lie. I said, because the reason why I say that is because of this. And a lot of it depends on how you ask them the question. If I go in and I say, listen, I got you on videotape stealing the watch from the store. What's the first thing this person's going to say? Let me see the video.
Show me the
Yeah.
video.
Yeah. And you show them let's say you do have a video and you show it to them. That looks like me, but that ain't me.
Yes. How many people watch? There again,
Yeah.
they watch themselves and are like, that's not me.
Yeah. That's not me. That's another bald-headed white guy with a beard.
Same clothes they're wearing.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
not me.
Those look
Same,
like my shoes.
same tattoo on
They
your
had-
hand. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
both of you missing the right leg, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's not me.
Yeah, it's not me. Yeah. So, so what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll ask a question. Is it possible? I did this on a rape test, on a rape one time. 2 college kids, they had sex. She said he raped her. So I go back and I'm giving him a polygraph test. He fails the polygraph test, fails it horribly. And I asked him, I gave him a piece of paper and I said, draw the scene because the sex happened in the bedroom. Draw the scene in the bedroom. He draws it out and draws the little end tables and draws where the clothes are and everything. I said, earlier you told me that when you guys first started talking, you were texting her. You were texting back and forth, right? He's like, yeah. I said, when she took her clothes off, because you said she took her clothes off, right? Yeah. So when she took her clothes off, where'd she put her cell phone? He's like, I don't know. I said, could it have been on the table right next to the bed? Could have been. Is it possible that she recorded this entire conversation between you and her during your sexual intercourse? And he looks at me and he says, well, if she did, that's illegal because she's got to tell me she. I'm like,
There we go. There we- You
yeah.
make such a good point. Now, legally,
There you go.
people go
Yeah.
nuts over this. And
Yeah.
it's been supported. We can use deception
Yeah.
in there. But I'm like you. I don't want to go to a point where we act like we're manufacturing anything. Because even though the prosecutor can explain to a jury that they can do that, your credibility doesn't look that good. And look at how many reversals we see eventually, or where it just looks nasty. But veiling that information, I remember one time on a very low level thing many years ago, we were doing a project on some stupid crimes, and I remember going before we interviewed somebody, is we stopped at a store and got a VHS tape. And I took it and I put evidence tape around it and then put a file folder with a bunch of junk in it. And when we went and sat down with this person at their house, I just laid it there. And when we started, the first thing he did goes, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not on that tape. And in my mind, I'm like, well, no shit, Sherlock, nobody's on that tape.
It's blank.
But there again, I'm not mad. I'm not going in and saying, look, I have you. That's that. I just think if people are doing that in the law enforcement world, stop.
I don't
Just
like
stop.
doing it. First of all,
Don't tell them you got your fingerprints when you ain't got their fingerprints.
exactly.
Lay the cards around, but don't do that.
Because it'll backfire on you. And if
Yeah.
it backfires on you, you lose all credibility. And it makes me feel bad personally to do it because I know that I'm lying to him.
That's it.
And I'm like, I just don't want to do that.
I didn't have problems with going in a room with murder books that weren't their murder books,
Yeah.
like 3-inch binders and. Ding,
Yeah, but I'm not going to say this is
no,
your,
that's
this is
it.
yeah.
But
I'm not gonna,
what they
yeah.
see is pages of data,
exactly.
and they believe that they're in that. I didn't have a problem with that. Laying fingerprint cards around, pulled prints and stuff. I didn't do it that often, but I'm with you, Eddie. I think that when you go in and you act like you materially have something you don't. This is a whole other topic, but you'll force a false confession.
Yeah, it'll backfire.
And
It'll
that's not
backfire
what
on
this
you
is
every time.
about.
It'll backfire every
I
single
love it. I'm
time.
glad
But,
you.
yeah,
we
but I
see
always
the same.
ask, when you talk about the statement analysis and stuff, I always ask that question: is it possible?
Yeah.
Right? And like I'll say on a rape test, if I knew that the victim had a SANE exam, I'll say, is it possible that your semen would come back in her vagina? When that medical report comes back, is it possible that your semen is in her vagina? No. How's that not possible? Because we never had sex. Okay.
Yeah.
Or if they say, well, if it comes back, I just don't know how. And they come up with all these different, there's no way because if, well, I guess anything's possible, or, well, if she did this or she did that, or, no, wait a minute, hold on. Earlier you said this. Now you're saying, so based on those statement analysis and based on that body language, how that stuff changed and shifts. Once you get a decent working knowledge, and some people can pick it up like that. Some people it took me forever to do this, to try to figure this out. And I'd been through a lot of training and watched a ton of other people do interviews. I would go up to some of the cases that were closed and pull the discs and watch interviews that homicide guys did. We had a detective, Chris Schoonover, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
Great guy.
Amazing guy.
Amazing interviewer. I'd go up and I'd watch some of his interviews, of cases he did years and years and years ago. And I say, I want to know how he did this. I want to know how this happened. Because, I'd been to the Reed School a bunch of times, and I've been to some, since then, cognitive interviewing classes and elicitation classes and stuff like this. And I got a pretty good working knowledge about how it works. But before I got to that point, I'm like, man, how much stuff did I miss? Mm-hmm. I went to this solicitation. They sent us to Roanoke, Virginia, to this solicitation class. And this lady that taught it was an amazing investigator. And as I'm sitting there listening to all this stuff and trying to write notes and stuff, and if I knew this 5 years ago, this case that is bugging me, maybe I could have used this technique. And I always go back and say, man, why didn't I learn this in the academy? Or why didn't I do this? Or why didn't somebody say, you need to go read this book?
And you make a good point. And I don't want to go too deep. The academy. I mean, we always wait till people get close to or in investigations and say, now we got to send you to read. Yeah. We should spend more time. I mean, because they're out there doing the truth seeking and the confirmation out there on the road every time they stop.
But think about this. How many people that are investigators that have never been to read?
Oh, yeah. It's crazy.
I'm like,
I've said before that when I started up there were no schools. You didn't go to schools. You were hoping you had good mentors in front of you. Yeah. And that's really not the way to approach this. We eventually got in schools, but there was no and I'm just a big believer that that when people are getting ready to hit the road, that's let them have the knowledge so they can sharpen that skill.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
Who's in a violent crime? Who's there first?
Yeah.
Them. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. I mean, they should, in the academy, and I don't know the whole curriculum of the academy. It's been 30 years since I was in the academy, but I don't know the whole curriculum now. But from my understanding, it's interviews and interrogations are minimal.
Oh, sure.
This is how you ask. This is how you conduct a traffic investigation. Okay, well, great. So what if there's a traffic investigation and you discover there's a dead body in the trunk?
Yeah.
You might want to ask some more questions. You know? So
or elicit some comments. I mean, there we go. All of that, I think, is valuable because, again, they have the first clean. I call it a clean shot at a good interview with somebody.
Yeah.
And but then I don't want to go to, because we have a culture that says you're not ready for that. We could. That's a whole other show. Is the police cultures and where we're backward.
And we was having a conversation today about victims, and polygraph, we can actually test a victim.
Right.
There's a technique we can use, and I've done it a few times. And I was reading some research the other day, and they were saying, we don't want victims to be interviewed. We want the detective to do it, because we don't want them to repeat the trauma over and over and over and over and over. But there's research out there now that says, no, that's exactly what we want them to do, because now it teaches them how to deal with this, because this is not going away.
Yeah.
So you can face it, you can deal with it, and you can positively move on with your life instead of trying to cover it up, acting like it didn't happen.
It comes back to who's doing the interview.
Exactly. You're
if
exactly
you're trauma
right.
informed, then I believe, without sound, and don't hope anybody loses their mind. If it's done correctly, there's a therapeutic event there.
Oh yeah, I agree.
And we were actually talking about that this morning with someone.
Is it if it's done right? There's, but again, I think that whole thing, and that's another, man, I need to bring some sane people in here and talk about that. Is Anita Capillo? I'm going to say her name, and she's agreed to come do the show. Is there was an evolution in policing on how to speak to sexual assault victims and stuff, but we'll table that for another one. But it's a different world.
There's a right and wrong way to do all of it, and just like body language and statement analysis, there's a right way to do it, there's a wrong way to do it. And like you said before, walking in with a phone book and a rubber hose and a bright light, I mean, that's that doesn't work anymore. And people who are I can negotiate with the best of them, because I've watched every episode of MSNBC's Law and Order or whatever.
Yeah, there we go.
It's this, training is training, and people say, what's the best training I can go to, to develop these skills? And I say all of it. Go to all of them.
That's it. Yeah.
Go to go to every course you can go to about anything and everything,
and pull the things in that work for you.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Right, because some of us won't be able to do some of the things, but find the things that you can get into your DNA pretty quick and run with them.
Well, we have the polygraph interns, and I tell them, I said, you need to watch me do a criminal test. You need to watch this examiner do a criminal test. I'm going to take you up to the Kentucky State Police. Marvin Hayden is up there, who's an outstanding examiner.
I miss Marvin.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Watch Marvin do a test. Take all that information you got, and you develop your own toolbox, and you use those tools.
That's it.
The way I ask a question you may not like for whatever reason, then don't use it. But you may like it. You're more than welcome to use it. And I tell everybody that when I've talked to detectives, I said, and I've been asked to watch some interviews and talk about some training and this, and I say, listen, I'll watch it. I got no problems. But if I'm watching David do an interview and David says something that I like, I'm stealing it from David.
Amen.
I'm going to take it. I'm going to tell him, listen, if you say something, I'm going to steal it and put it in my toolbox. And if you're watching me, I invite you to do the same thing. But it's all about cross-training everybody. And I'm big on cross-training. I'm big on OJT. But the problem about OJT that I don't like is that the person that's training you may not know everything they need to know to train you. So, you got to go back and do a lot of research on your own, watch a lot of videos, read a lot of research papers, attend a lot of schools. Body language is constantly changing. Everybody's body language is a little bit different. Nobody's body language is exactly the same. There are no absolutes. It's just one of those tools that you can use to think, the body language changed. I seen that anchor point movement. I seen this. I seen them move forward. I seen them take a big deep breath, look up and to the left before they answered the question. Why did that occur? Well, I need to go ask some more questions.
Yeah.
So then you just go back and start digging into it. And
never stop learning.
Never stop. Yeah.
So, and then we'll throw one more zinger on that too, is the legal ramifications of these methods and how they're applied.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, I don't want to rabbit hole that, but you got to know those. You have to know those.
Yeah.
Well, Eddie, thank you so much. You've shared a wealth of knowledge, and it's so intriguing. I don't think I took my eyes off of you the entire time, except for when you looked at me and I looked down because I didn't want you to read my mind.
You probably looked in the wrong direction.
I probably looked in the wrong direction, but I tried to keep my feet towards you.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing all this.
You're welcome.
I'm just blown away at all this stuff,
Likewise, I hate to say it, but we worked at the same place for a long time, and every time we sit down and do this in retirement, I learn more than I did when we were together.
I feel like Eddie's so much smarter than you, don't you?
Exactly. Yeah. The thing is again, the people, I think, what our avatar, our audience, for the most part, likes this authenticity, and I'm grateful for that. There's so much out there that people just don't know.
Well, they don't know, and they don't know what goes into it and the science behind it.
Well, just Chief Justice John Roberts, we're in May of 2025, just a couple weeks ago was quoted as saying that I don't think he said it mean, we've raised some generations of people that have no idea how the system works, but they're quick to criticize it. Something that I'm paraphrasing. And I think how we cure that is having people like you lay all of this out. So I think staying away from the absolutes, making sure people understand these are simply tools. They're not all of that. Don't read too much into it, but don't miss it. I love the message too of growth, of learning.
Oh, yeah.
We all should. Look how long you've been doing it, and you still research. Research.
Yeah. When I'm not doing polygraphs, I'm probably reading research papers. I'm looking at YouTube videos. I'm watching other detectives that post stuff on the internet, how they do, how they do their interviews. And a lot of times you were saying that, because of the way the rooms are set up physically, this is how you have to do it. I always say, never negotiate with a barrier between you and the person.
Amen. 100%.
Right. But sometimes you can't do that.
Yeah.
So you got to do the best you can do.
Yeah.
So it's
I did one in New Orleans. Yeah, New Orleans Parish Prison and a coffee break room for the correction center. Yeah, and well, I don't know. I'm pretty sure if you went back and pulled the old videotape that we were talking to this person, and you'd have corrections officers come in and make coffee, and they would be behind the person I'm talking to, and they're like,
well, and let's
stirring
even
coffee.
get back to, you mentioned
You're talking about
Chris.
distraction.
Chris Schoonover went down to interview Tommy Linsells in a supply closet.
Yes, exactly. You do it. Hey, that's what this game is all about.
You got to do what you got to do.
Amen.
You got to, it's about solving crime, and as crime fighters, investigators, detectives, whatever you want to call us, I mean, we do what we got to do to put the bad people in jail.
That's
so
it.
It's
Well, thanks for the educational
Yeah,
pitch.
thank you.
you're
I mean that
welcome.
sincerely. The depth of it is incredible. So now we got to get together and think of another reason to have you back.
Okay.
And again, thank you for the portrait of George.
Oh, you're welcome.
If he's not in the shot, I'll make sure I bleed him in real quick because
please
it's a great picture of that guy too. I'll say one. I thought of it. I didn't hit it when you talked about the belly button. Can I say this?
Scared now, aren't you?
No. But you rode horses. Is that when you're riding, one of the traditional training methods is that the horse will follow your belly button.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not all reins and pulling and everything, but it's the subtle rotation of your
It's
body.
the shift of your.
And most of your better equine
And
instructors
they can
will.
feel. The
Yeah, they can feel
So,
that little
so
bit of a
it's
shift.
funny because
Oh, wow, I
like
didn't know
an instructor will tell you, point your belly button where you want to go,
Oh.
and that so it's again we go back to that thing how most of this is so innate. It's just creatures, right? It's incredible, but when you're riding, that's it. Is if you, it's not just pulling somebody; it's rotating that body, and the horse feels that. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
We taught Eddie something today.
There you go.
Exactly, yeah,
I don't know anything
yeah.
about a horse anyway.
Yeah, well, we'll go out and I'll saddle him up and throw you on him real quick
No,
because he
I-
needs a little work. So,
So-
well, good deal. Thanks again.
Thank
Oh, you're
Eddie.
welcome. You're welcome.
Good
Anytime, man. I'll come back anytime you want. I love talking about this stuff. I could stay here until 9:00 tonight and talk about it if we wanted to.
Yeah, well, I'd have to use the bathroom somewhere between
Yeah,
that point. But
you'd have
good
to-
stuff.
Don't blow Eddie's flow.
Get-
Yeah, exactly.
Don't
No,
ruin
no.
his load.
Good deal.
Get permission from my wife because that's
There we
but
go.
I love talking about this kind of stuff. So anytime you want to talk about it, I'm available.
Good
So
deal. Maybe one day we'll try to. We haven't done any live work. Maybe one day we'll live stream up and do an event and have people
fine,
ask
yeah.
questions. That just occurred to me.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd
yeah,
be fun.
that would be that might be our
fun,
first
yeah.
live stream event. We've never done that. So, otherwise, thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Eddie.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
The Murder Police podcast is hosted by Wendy and David Lyons and was created to honor the lives of crime victims, so their names are never forgotten. It is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lyons. The Murder Police podcast can be found on your favorite Apple or Android podcast platform, as well as at murderpolicepodcast.com, where you will find show notes, transcripts, information about our presenters, and a link to the official Murder Police podcast merch store, where you can purchase a huge variety of Murder Police podcast swag. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, which is closed caption for those that are hearing impaired. Just search for the Murder Police podcast and you will find us. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe for more and give us 5 stars and a written review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcasts. Make sure you set your player to automatically download new episodes so you get the new ones as soon as they drop. And please tell your friends. Lock it down, Judy.